Good evening. I'm Ludger Hagedorn, Permanent Fellow here at the IWM, the Institute for Human Sciences, and I extend a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the Institute. Great that you're joining us for this evening. The title of tonight is Chasing Shadows. Great title anyway. Extra great title in reference to the city of Vienna and to one of the most famous sequences in movie history, Chasing Shadows. They're chasing somebody with the name Harry Lime, and for a very long time this guy seems to be a mere shadow, but in the end it turns out he is real flesh and blood, and maybe something that is also significant for the talk tonight. We are running this evening in cooperation with two partners. I'm very happy to mention them at the beginning. This is the Canadian Embassy in Vienna and the Austrian Institute of Technology. It's great that we are doing this together with our partners, and I especially want to welcome the representative of the Embassy in Vienna, Her Excellency Ambassador Alison Grant. Welcome. Small applause, please. And one additional thing, this talk tonight is in the larger framework of our digital humanism program. The digital humanism program has become quite a significant part of what we are doing at the IWM. We are running this program for 5 years now, almost 5 years. And we are running it continuously in cooperation with a ministry. The ministry in between has changed its name, but we continue the cooperation, which is very good. And the ministry is the Federal Ministry for Innovation, Mobility and Infrastructure, and we are very grateful for this cooperation, and I think it deserves to be mentioned at the beginning. Enough from me. Chasing Shadows. I couldn't think of a better guide for this than my dear colleague Ivan Krastev, who will now also introduce the speaker, and I wish you a great evening.
So listen, I'm going to be with a very short introduction, because you're here not because you don't know who Ron is. You're here because you know. Just to be sure that you know at least his institutional affiliation, he's a professor in political science in the Monk School in the University of Toronto. Normally when a moderator talks about the speaker, that he's a legendary figure, this normally speaks only about the bad taste of the moderator, but in this case it is true. He is, many of you know this area more than me. This is true because he basically shaped the public debate with some of his work and investigation in the way very rarely professors in political science do. Yeah, you should be, because the problem is not that chasing shadows is good, but also you could be chased by shadows. Yeah. But I want to make one point. I remember years ago that there was one of those distance conferences with Snowden. It was just after he left, and he basically was saying never in history individuals have been so much watched and surveilled. And I was thinking about this, and I do believe he was wrong. Because if you're a religious person in the Middle Ages, God is watching to you, and basically God sees everything, including your thoughts. But the difference is that you believe that God was just. The problem is that many of the people who are watching you these days, you do not have the same assumption. And this is why I'm very much really excited to give the role to Four, because this is not simply about what happened, but also how it happened. This is much more story. So this is the first in our Netflix lectures, because basically it can end up as a film. So Ron, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Ivan, for that very kind introduction. Thank you, Ambassador Grant, for hosting, sponsoring, and the other sponsors as well. And I just want to say, first of all, I'm so grateful to have been here. I'm going to be leaving soon. I've had such a great time. I don't know what I'm going to do for lunch when I get home, because the lunches here are amazing, and my fellows I've got to know So thanks everybody for coming out. So I'm going to, we can throw those slides up now. I'm going to, coming, magic. 1 second. Okay. Yeah, it was green. 1 second, we'll get it.
It should have happened to me, not to
Yeah. This one? Choose content. Window wrap. Choose window wrap. Okay, I think we have it now. Woo! Thank you, George. Okay, so just by way of introduction, a little bit about the Citizen Lab. For those of you who don't know, as Yvonne said, I'm a professor at the University of Toronto, and I'm the founder and director of something called the Citizen Lab, which I founded. It's our 25th anniversary. We do evidence-based research on digital security issues that arise out of human rights concerns. The Citizen Lab does very unusual work. It's very interdisciplinary. I'm an international relations guy by background, but many of the people who work at the Citizen Lab come from many different disciplines, especially technical disciplines. We have some of the world's best forensic scientists at the lab, so it's truly interdisciplinary. We're religiously vegan independent, I would say. We don't take any money from governments or companies, even the Canadian government. In order to do the work that we do, we have to be truly independent. And I see our mission as doing a kind of watchdog role, digital accountability if you want. And in fact, when I wrote the proposal for the Citizen Lab, I used this language, counterintelligence for civil society. That was back in 2001. I thought, ooh, that sounds very edgy and cool, and they'll love that. And I never thought we'd actually be doing it. Fast forward to today, that's exactly what we do. We do it quite well, to the point of maybe careful what you wish for. So we work in many, many different areas, but today I'm going to talk about our research, our investigations into what we call the mercenary surveillance industry. So there is a very lucrative, very global industry of companies that provide tools to government clients, to law enforcement, intelligence, to military, to track, hack, get inside people's devices, their phones, and so forth. This is not a very public industry, of course. It's very covert, very secretive. I'm imagining most people have never heard of these companies, maybe with the exception of the one up there, NSO Group, which is the manufacturer of the infamous Pegasus spyware. So if you've heard of NSO Group or Pegasus spyware, it's likely because of the research of the Citizen Lab and our partners in this space. So the big takeaway of our last, I would say, about decade and a half of research in this area is that this technology is widely abused. So even though these companies claim they're selling to governments only for their technology to be used in very strictly controlled ways to fight, investigate serious matters of crime and terrorism and so forth, the big takeaway of our investigations is actually that's not what they're doing. They're using it to go after journalists. They're using it to go after lawyers, human rights defenders, family members, and so on. And interestingly, this is not just an authoritarian country problem. It's also a problem in many democracies, as I will explain to you, including here in Europe. So just by way of beginning, I'm going to tell you a little story, probably one of the most I would say most disturbing cases that we've been involved in, and it gives you a little flavor of how we go about doing our work. So back in the summer of 2018, we were monitoring NSO Group's server infrastructure using a variety of network measurement techniques, internet scanning techniques, and we had at this time extraordinary visibility. We could see almost all of what NSO Group's government clients were doing with their spyware. And among their government clients, one stood out in the summer, and that was Saudi Arabia. We could see that they had successfully hacked a device in Canada. And of course, being based in Canada, and being Canadian, that was very interesting to us. The ambassador might remember summer of 2018, there was a big diplomatic dispute between Canada and Saudi Arabia. Our prime minister had criticized the Saudi human rights record, as did our foreign affairs minister. So we wondered, who is Saudi Arabia spying on in Canada? All we had was information about the IP address, the internet service provider of this device, but we didn't know who owned it. And so we set out to find our needle in the haystack. And the way that we went about doing this was we drew up a short list of people that we suspected the Saudi government would be interested in Canada. And we didn't look at politicians or business people. We thought Saudi Arabia is probably spying on an activist, and there's probably a handful of them in Canada. So one of my researchers literally went door to door. We could see this phone was located in the Montreal, Sherbrooke, Quebec region of Canada, and that's about it. So we went through and we met a bunch of people, and finally we came across this guy. This is Omar Abdulaziz. So he had moved to Canada in 2010 or so to study at a university called Bishop's University. And he became energized by the Arab Spring. He started a YouTube channel that became very, very popular, very critical of Saudi Arabia, kind of a satirical channel. He had about 1 million followers. And so when we met with Omar, we explained who we are, and we said, can we look through your text message history? And when we did that, we discovered this text message that he had received earlier in the summer, and we knew right from this that we had found our needle in the haystack. So within his SMS history was a message that's a fake DHL shipment notification. And we could tell from the domain, because we've been tracking NSO Group's infrastructure, that this was a NSO Group Pegasus domain that he had received. Coincidentally, he had ordered protein powder on Amazon earlier that day, and when this came, he was tricked and he clicked on the link. So clicking on the link activates an exploit, takes over the phone. So this was a big deal. This was around late August 2018, we made this discovery. We started writing up our report, getting ready to publish it. The report came out October 1st, 2018. The very next morning, Omar messaged me and said, Jamal has gone missing. I'm very afraid. And I was like, who are you talking about? I had no idea up until this moment that Omar Abdulaziz and Jamal Khashoggi were very close confidants. So throughout that summer of 2018, they had been communicating over what they quite reasonably thought were secure end-to-end encrypted messages over WhatsApp. And what they were doing was plotting kind of democratic activism. They had this scheme to distribute untraceable SIM cards. And the whole time, the Saudi government was watching all of these communications thanks to Pegasus spyware. And if you look at some of these exchanges, you can actually see they're a little bit paranoid. They think, well, how do they know about what, that part or this part, which is quite interesting to look back on. And of course, we all know what happened to Jamal Khashoggi on October 2nd, 2018. He went into the consulate in Istanbul and was never seen again. After that incident, we then checked the phones of family members of Jamal, colleagues of Jamal, journalists and so forth. Many other people had their phones hacked with Pegasus spyware, we were able to verify. So the Saudis had essentially cast a surveillance net around Jamal Khashoggi leading up to his brutal execution. Now, when representatives of these companies are asked about this sort of thing, hey, what do you say to this Citizen Lab report? They say something like this, our technology is strictly controlled to investigate serious matters of crime and terrorism. If you're a criminal, don't have to be afraid. Well, the big takeaway of our research is actually you should be very, very afraid. So I'm afraid this whole conversation is going to come with one big trigger warning for you all. By the end, you may not look at your phone quite the same way again. Let's step back for a minute and let me explain a bit about how spyware works of this sort, and also how we do the investigations that we do. And I'm going to walk you through a few stories that, one case leading to another. But first, let's talk about spyware. So this is a graphic The Guardian did about Pegasus spyware, which is actually very useful. So over here in the blue, you have the capabilities of Pegasus or other types of spyware. Very, very powerful. So if you can implant this on someone's phone, you can read all of their emails, you can read all of their text messages, even those that are end-to-end encrypted. In fact, that's a driving attraction for the market to defeat end-to-end encryption. You get on somebody's phone, you can see everything from their eyes. You can do a lot more too. You can turn on the camera, you can activate the microphone. So for example, say we were having a private meeting right now. We were activists in a risky country. All it would take was one person's phone in this room to be implanted with spyware, and someone on the other side of the world could eavesdrop on this whole conversation. Also, take note, GPS, of course, right? You can follow somebody around. So this is amazing, powerful technology. I often imagine what it must be like, almost godlike capabilities, put in the hands of some of the world's ruthless despots and dictators and other people have access to this technology. Now it's over here that the really interesting stuff happens. So in order to get Pegasus spyware on somebody's device, you have to crack open the device. And that involves getting a hold of some kind of information about a software flaw on the device. That could be on an application like WhatsApp. Maybe WhatsApp engineers, made a mistake, and these companies are able to take advantage of it and pry open the device and then implant the spyware. In industry jargon, this is known as 0 days. This is the real commodity part of the marketplace. This is also constantly evolving as security features are updated on phones. They have to go back to the drawing board, find a new way to get inside the phone. If you were to go out and purchase a 0 day, that means a software flaw that, say, Apple is not even aware of yet, it would cost you about $10 million. Now, an interesting byproduct of the research that we do in this space is many, many times we have actually captured these exploits. And if I was unethical, I wouldn't be here speaking to you. I'd be on a Cayman Islands or something like that. But we're based at the University of Toronto. We have an ethical responsibility to do what is known as responsible disclosures. And actually, this is something that doesn't get a lot of attention outside of the industry, but it's the thing I'm most proud of the work of the lab, is the practical impact we've had on every person's digital security many times over. And for those of you who are professors in the audience, you have to account in your research grants. They often ask, what impact has your research had? Well, we can live off this for many, many years. I want to talk about one responsible disclosure that also involved somebody related to Saudi Arabia that was really important. This was back in September 2021. There's a person named Loujain Al-Hatul. You might not recognize the name, but when I tell you who she is, you'll remember, I'm sure. She is a Saudi women's rights activist. So for many, many years, she has advocated for a woman's right to drive a car without a male chaperone in Saudi Arabia. So in Saudi Arabia, that's a criminal, that's a terrorist. For her activism, she's been, of course, harassed multiple times. She's been arrested, brutally tortured. I spent many, many hours talking to her about her horrible experiences. One day when she got out of prison, she thought, maybe I should get my phone checked, and she reached out to us, and we did a forensic analysis of her phone. Sure enough, it had been hacked by the UAE on behalf of Saudi Arabia, which is something that often happens. This was a very special version of Pegasus. So recall with the case of Omar, in order to activate the spyware, they had to trick him into clicking on a link into doing something. This was an unprecedented, more sophisticated version of the spyware that required no interaction whatsoever. So 1 minute your phone is perfectly fine, all the software is up to date. The next minute it's taken over and implanted with Pegasus spyware, and you're none the wiser. So this is like the nuclear option of the spyware that we discovered. We did a responsible disclosure to Apple, and of course they patched the flaw. But then Apple did a whole bunch of things in 2021 that were quite significant that I want to point out. So first of all, they announced that they're going to sue NSO Group. They later withdrew that suit, but still, that was significant at the time. They announced they're going to donate $10 million to support cybersecurity research of the sort that the Citizen Lab has been involved in, which I think is good. They did this. They unveiled a new security feature called lockdown mode. And essentially what this does is reduce the attack surface of your iPhone. I have had it on all the time since September 2021. We have yet to see any iPhone be hacked with lockdown mode enabled. Neither has Apple. It's a bit inconvenient to use, so I don't recommend it for everybody, but for high-risk people, we definitely recommend this. And then lastly, they started doing what are known as threat notifications. This is something we'd been advocating to Apple for many years and other companies. We would say to them, look, if you decide to examine your own customers' data and what's going on, which a lot of them do, they certainly have the capabilities to do, and you discover somebody's been hacked, you kind of have a responsibility to let them know. And it took a while to convince them to do that, but Apple started sending out these notifications, and then WhatsApp started sending out these notifications as well. These are really significant for a group like ours because what's happening is they're effectively doing triage. So when notifications go out, those people will eventually reach out to us at the Citizen Lab. And in fact, as I speak to you right now, Apple just sent out a whole new batch of notifications. So we're getting flooded with inquiries from people who want to get their phones checked. I'll be talking a bit more about the threat notifications in a couple of minutes. Now, at the same time we were investigating Loujain al-Hatul, totally crazy case happened. And remember I said her device was hacked by the UAE government operator. So we were very closely looking at the UAE government operator, and at this time we discovered that there was a law firm in the UK that had an infected phone in it. And so we reached out to figure out, well, whose phone is this? And we met with the lawyers, and it turned out that Sheikh Mohammed, the Prime Minister of the UAE, had used Pegasus spyware not to go after a criminal or a terrorist, but to hack the phone of his ex-wife, Princess Haya, he was involved in a child custody and divorce proceedings in UK courts. But he didn't just hack her phone, we discovered. He hacked all of her security detail, and he hacked the phone of this person to her left. That's a sitting member of the UK House of Lords, Baroness Shackleton. She's a lawyer. Among her other clients at this time was then Prince, now King Charles, and Sir Paul McCartney. So you can imagine the ripples that went through UK high society when this came out. Now there was a really, almost, I would say, Fellini-esque moment in this investigation because after we did this very discreet, confidential disclosure to Princess Haya and Baroness Shackleton, coincidentally, Sherry Blair, she later testified in court, frantically called Baroness Shackleton at a few hours after we notified her saying, I've been told to alert you, your device has been hacked. Well, it turns out Sherry Blair worked for a PR firm, and among her clients was NSO Group. And so they somehow got wind that the Citizen Lab had uncovered this, and they got her to warn Baroness Shackleton. It doesn't end there. So the UAE was very busy in the UK, and we also noticed that there was a device that was hacked in what appeared to us to be 10 Downing Street on Sunday night and over into Monday morning. And we thought, you know, this isn't really in our mandate. Governments should take care of themselves. But given the lawsuit that's going on with Princess Haya and this UAE operator that seems to be hacking a lot of people, I think we have a responsibility to notify the UK authorities, and that's exactly what we did. And I seem to recall they said something like, "Oh no, not again." So I'd like to continue the excursion here with a focus on some of the big European cases, because it's really been just amazing experience over the last like 4 or 5 years. Let me begin in Spain. So in 2022, after 18 months of field work, we published a report that we called Catalan Gate. We uncovered a massive domestic espionage operation in Spain. This was really jaw-dropping. So everyone knows the Catalonia, Spain situation. Many negotiations going on back and forth, whatever. Well, somebody in the Spanish government, we don't know who, is using Pegasus and other spyware to put a huge cross-section of Catalan civil society under surveillance, including the sitting president of Catalonia, Per Aragonés, as well as the last 3 sitting presidents of Catalonia, and their lawyers, journalists, activists, and so on. It was really profoundly disturbing to roll all of this up. Now, there was maybe a Fellini-esque moment here. So just a couple of days after a report came out and it was making world news, out of the blue, Spain's prime minister said, "Hey, we're victims too. We checked our phones and our phones have been hacked with Pegasus." I don't know if this was an evasion tactic or maybe they were actually hacked. If so, by whom? I don't know. We didn't check their phones. But that was certainly an interesting wrinkle. And then a couple of days later, the head of intelligence was fired in the country. And I'd actually just arrived back in Barcelona. That's me with my colleague Elias Campo, who assisted in the investigations, holding up the newspaper. And it's not a hostage photo. We're holding up the newspaper because we were so surprised that the head of intelligence was sacked after our investigation. That seemed like a big deal. Coincidentally, Elias, who was doing the principal outreach for us on the investigations, at one point, somebody tried to hack his phone. And so out of an abundance of caution, we thought, you know what, Elias, we better check your family. And it turns out that his sister, his mother, and his father all had their phones hacked with Pegasus spyware. Why? Because they couldn't get into Elias's phone. The mother and father are both very well-known physicians. The mother's an oncologist. So to think that somebody hacked their phones with all of that confidential patient data, it just goes to show the frivolous nature of some of the targeting. There are investigations afterwards, and this is kind of comical and maybe a bit frustrating depending on the way you look at it. So the European Parliament launched an investigation called the PEGA Committee about Pegasus scandals in Europe. Spain was basically intransigent. They were stonewalling the European investigation. They weren't helpful, let's put it that way. But Spain itself was also investigating the hacking of the prime minister and the defense minister, and guess what? Israel, in that case, was not helpful to Spain. So these, 2 governments basically stonewalling for different purposes. But as often happens, you had lower level processes going on, so accountability can come in many different ways. As we speak, there's been indictments at a Barcelona level court. The head of intelligence that was fired is under investigation, and they actually indicted 3 executives from NSO Group. So we'll see where that goes. Let me turn to Greece. Greece's Watergate. I just came back from Greece last week, following up on all of this. And this is a really interesting evolution. It's a good example of how one case can lead to another. So in December 2021, we did a report on the hacking of an Egyptian opposition politician's phone. And this was really significant in and of itself because we found that his phone was hacked by 2 different governments using 2 different spyware products. I've never seen something like this before. Pegasus, made by NSO Group, but then this other product called Predator, which is manufactured by a company called Intellexa. And in that investigation, in this report, if you read it, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like, what is this company about? Who owns it? It's not easy to actually, you know, it's not like you can open up the phone book and figure out who's behind it. But we could see that this guy, Tal Dillian, was the principal owner of this company called Intellexa that manufactures this Predator spyware. He's a veteran of Israel's Signals Intelligence Agency. Intellexa, by the way, they had a clever brand name. They called themselves the Star Alliance of Surveillance Technologies, which I thought was interesting. But in the course of this investigation, we did internet scanning for Predator servers around the world, and there were a number of countries where we thought, there's something going on there that's worthy of more investigation, including Greece. And in the appendix of our report, we published a bunch of domain names that we thought that were related to Predator's infrastructure that we thought suggested something's going on in Greece. And eventually that got the attention of people in Greece, starting with this fellow, Thanasis Koukakis, who's an investigative journalist. He had been investigating corruption at the highest levels of the Greek government, and he saw our report, noticed the Greek part of it, and reached out to us. And we did a forensic analysis of his phone, and sure enough, it was hacked with Predator spyware. And then an MEP, Nikos Andropoulos, noticed the report as well, and his staff actually checked his phone, and we could see he was targeted with spyware. And then a former foreign minister did the same thing. And so, you know, eventually victims started coming out in Greece. There was a real bombshell case that we unearthed. A Greek American who was working for Meta's threat intelligence firm, with whom we cooperated a bit on this investigation. Her phone was hacked with Predator spyware, but in her case they tricked her using a fake COVID appointment, which I thought was really insidious. That's kind of distasteful, or actually quite dangerous, let's face it. So this triggered Greece's Watergate scandal. It was a big controversy. Head of intelligence resigned in that country as well, as the nephew of the prime minister, who's his national security advisor, involved in all sorts of hijinks. But he survived the election. It didn't topple the government, but it's still ongoing, and many developments have happened. This guy, who's the owner of Intellexa, was in 2024 sanctioned by the Treasury Department, which is, I think, a good thing, holding people responsible. And then, like in Catalonia, there are lower level criminal investigations going on. And he has now been sentenced to 8 years in jail. He's appealing that, as well as several of his colleagues. So that's a really interesting case. Let's continue the tour now. Let's move to Poland. Prime Minister Donald Tusk, when he was in the opposition, he was reading about all of our investigations, and he thought, maybe I should get my phone checked. So again, reached out to us at the Citizen Lab. His phone was fine, but his lawyer and principal assistant's phone was hacked with Pegasus spyware. And we found a bunch of other people in Poland had been hacked as well in the political opposition. Then an election happened, and guess what? Now he's prime minister, and he's very motivated to hold the people who hacked all of these phones responsible. So he's launched investigations. The spy chief has been arrested in the country. And there's the former justice minister. Some of you may have heard about this. He actually fled Poland, first to Hungary, where he was being protected by Orban, until the election happened a couple of weeks ago. And guess who invited him to the United States? Yes, Donald Trump, I said. Italy, here we go. This case, we were investigating yet another company, Paragon. They were very interesting to us because they used to be owned by Israelis, and then they were purchased by Americans. They were portraying themselves as the anti-NSO group. We are the responsible spyware vendor. We only sell to liberal democratic countries. Our technology will not be abused and so forth. We discovered that they had a very clever technique that was exploiting WhatsApp to implant their spyware. So we let WhatsApp know about it, and WhatsApp sent out notifications, and we did forensic analysis on some of the people that received them, including migrant support workers in Italy had their phones hacked. And then a journalist got a notification from Apple, this guy, Ciro Pellegrino. And you can see here, he said, one Thursday evening, I got this message from Apple, hey, you better check your phone out. So he reached out to us at the lab. And he is a journalist, but also an author who had been investigating fascist ties in Maloney's party. So again, not a criminal, not a terrorist. It's a democratic country. Big problem. Now, the interesting fallout here is that Paragon and Italy are kind of throwing each other under the bus. So the spyware company said, you know what, we're not going to do business with Italy anymore because they abused our technology. And Italy said, well, no, wait, we're blaming you for this. So they're kind of pointing fingers at each other. And then recently there's a criminal investigation, and the prosecutors there have actually verified that our analysis is correct, which is very useful for us. So again, this is all ongoing as we speak. I don't know how it will end up. Now, as I mentioned, I think at the beginning, the Citizen Lab is not an advocacy organization. We're not an NGO, but obviously we have policy recommendations that we like to communicate, that we hope governments will follow to mitigate some of the harms that we've uncovered. And we've had some success there. Back in late 2022, 2023, we were invited several times to the White House and briefed the National Security Council on what we think should be done. And then President Biden signed an executive order that prohibited 18 US federal agencies from procuring spyware from companies where it can be shown it's involved in human rights abuses or presents a national security risk. That's a big deal. To have the President of the United States sign an executive order on an issue you care about is, for a political scientist, it's kind of like winning the Holy Grail or something like that. Unfortunately, things have changed, as I'll talk about in a few minutes. As you can imagine, and as I've alluded to, there are lots of cases of litigation, investigations, probably about a dozen lawsuits around the world in which my lab's research is evidentiary in some ways. And generally speaking, that's a good thing. You want there to be a pathway to justice for victims, and ultimately maybe the outcome that you want, but it can be both positive and maybe a bit complicated. So here's a positive case. This is another Saudi activist based in the UK, Ghanem al-Maziri, who sued the Saudis for hacking his phone. We determined his phone was hacked in 2018. And actually, he was physically assaulted on the streets of London by Saudi agents. And UK court awarded him $4.1 million in damages. So that's a pretty significant outcome. WhatsApp sued NSO Group in California courts, and that case went on for about 6 years. The judge issued damages against NSO Group, $168 million, later reduced it on appeal, and the appeals are still going on. But this really illustrated some of the risks around this type of litigation. So in the course of this litigation, NSO Group used the discovery process to try to come after the Citizen Lab. And so, they'd send subpoenas to researchers, private investigators. They sent discovery requests to me in Canada. And it was all fine. We had, the judge kind of batted them down, thankfully. But I had to get, of course, US legal representation that costed me $250,000. That's a lot of money that comes out of research grants, and yet it's important to do. So just showing you some of the risks. Now, obviously, doing this type of work, powerful people are not going to take this lying down. There's been a lot of disinformation against the Citizen Lab. A lot of it actually started with the Spain case, and I blame Spanish nationalists for a lot of the crazy disinformation out there. This is a graphic that ran on Polish primetime state television under the former government. And you can see it's like a mob diagram, and there I am, reporting to Julian Assange and Russian intelligence. I swear I'm not a Russian agent. In fact, the Citizen Lab was recently designated an undesirable entity. And we've reported many times on Russian cyber espionage. On the more serious side is this. Back in 2019, we discovered that people were making strange outreach to my staff, inviting them to meetings, asking us leading questions. So we got suspicious. We got together with colleagues at Associated Press, and we kind of prolonged the interaction, met at a very fancy restaurant in Manhattan, and at a certain predetermined time, the cameras came out of Associated Press, and guess what? We were being targeted by ex-Mossad agents working for a company called Black Cube. If that name doesn't ring a bell, you might remember Harvey Weinstein hired them to go after women who alleged sexual assault and rape. So this company was coming after us. That makes you feel a bit differently when you're traveling. You start looking over your shoulder, let me tell you that. Now, with all of this going on, people often ask me, what keeps me awake at night? And it's not necessarily Black Cube or whatever. It's actually this. I did up this diagram, and I believe that, look, the world is in a shitty mess. Sorry to use bad language, but I think everyone agrees. And I've often puzzled, like, why are we in this terrible situation? And I actually think we're caught in this vicious cycle. And this is my own, private nightmare that I have. I haven't written about this yet, but just to conclude my comments, I kind of want to walk you through how I see us trapped in this negative, self-reinforcing feedback loop. So it begins with surveillance capitalism, or the business model of social media, which, as many people know, this is nothing shocking or original. Every application you use, every app on your phone, has one overarching purpose, and that's to gather as much information about you in order to target advertisements. That's the business model, the personal data surveillance economy. So it's a bike share app, it's a taxi app, it's an airline booking app, whatever they call it. Underneath it all, its principal imperative is to put you under surveillance. So no matter how the companies advertise themselves, connecting you with friends and family, making your life simpler and so on, we're ultimately the livestock for their data farms. And I'm convinced once you see that, you can't unsee that. Yes, that's my favorite. Now, there are all sorts of companies that operate around the big tech platforms that are designed to amplify and enrich this. And human nature being what it is, we tend to be attracted to content that excites us, that makes us angry. And so, again here, nothing revelatory, the algorithms of the social media companies, as we all know, they propel forward this sensational, extreme content, and that's to keep you glued to your screen. Why? Because they want to know about you, what you're doing, and the way to do that is by putting in front of you very sensational content, and we all know the harms that could cause. So getting back to my vicious cycle, I've thought about this, and as a professor thinking about this, if you were to create in a laboratory setting the perfect ecosystem for the flourishing of the industry that I just described to you, you couldn't do better than the properties of the existing social media landscape. So, and it operates really on two levels. One is on the content layer. So it helps, by the way, that all of the tech platforms have now basically rolled back all of the trust and safety checks that they had in place. It's all gas, no breaks. That's because they profit from the most extreme content on the platforms. You see that not just on Meta, but in the other companies as well. And of course, now we have AI putting tools in the hands of individuals to create these very realistic, artificially generated videos. And you even have the President of the United States, routinely sending these out and shocking people. And there's a great term for this, slopaganda. Now, what does this do? Well, obviously it degrades the quality of the public sphere, if you want to use that language. But what it also does is it creates an opportunity for a different type of mercenary company to thrive in. And that is companies that have been set up to essentially commercialize psychological operations, influence operations. Again, this is a very secretive industry. You don't hear much about it, but we at the Citizen Lab are very much investigating this now. This is just one example. This is a company called Psy Group, but the reason I pulled them out is their tagline, reality is a matter of perception. Sounds like Jean Baudrillard meets the Mossad or something like that. This is another company. This is a Mexican company, Victory Lab. They'll work for anybody. You want to discredit somebody you don't like, you could hire them. They'll mount a whole AI-generated campaign to take somebody down. Look at that tagline. It's not manipulation, it's guided thinking. Is that not creepy? Last fall, we published a report where we were able to uncover an influence operation that we were able to attribute to the IDF that was, again, it was quite insidious. So what was going on here was at the very moment Israel was bombing the notorious Evin prison, they had also contracted out to one of these companies to mount a disinformation influence operation to encourage Iranians to rise up and storm the prison. Think about that for a minute. And we published that in collaboration with Haaretz. So there's all of this disinformation influence operations, but there's also, of course, the surveillance part of this because you're attached to the device. I talked about spyware already. I won't go back into that. But there's more than one way to get access to your location, all that you're doing on your device. And the area that I'm really worried about mostly now is not actually spyware. It's this industry called, which goes by their own acronym, ADINT. So in intelligence jargon, you have HUMINT, TechInt, SIGINT. Well, the new thing is ADINT. And what this involves are companies that set themselves up to exploit the real-time data brokerage that takes place behind the scenes on all of us right now in this room. So the way it works is whenever you open a browser, visit a website, open any application, a lot of data about you and your phone goes into this real-time bazaar. And within a millisecond, companies bid on sending you a targeted advertisement. And that's why you get, when you're talking about a vacation, suddenly you get an advertisement for that vacation. Or you're walking by an Old Navy and you get an advertisement for the discounted jeans or whatever. It's all about where are you right now? Who are you? I want to sell you something. That's the surveillance economy working as intended. Well, naturally, this is a great big business opportunity for companies like this one. There's a company called Patterns. There's a leak brochure of theirs. May not be able to read that very easy. People carry the phone with them at all time, especially during crisis times. I love the language that they use here. We help national security agencies detect audience patterns and user behavior using digital advertising, data mining, and analytics. Over 5 billion unique user IDs profiled. Now, I've been told, and I'm confident that this is true, that from companies like this, you can do the following. I hear there's a lecture going on at the IWM, and it's in this room right now. I want to draw a geofence around this room, and I want to know who's in that room. Companies like this, based on the advertising data, brokerages that they have access to, can spit out a dossier that looks like this. Your gender, your home address, your work location, your device details, recent locations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is obviously extremely dangerous stuff, and it's the one that I'm most worried about. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Citizen Lab published a report on one of these companies that markets this type of advertising intelligence, done in collaboration, by the way, with an Austrian researcher that works for us now named Wolfie Crystal, some of you might know. It's a company called Penlink, which is US company. They took over a company called Cobwebs, and what they do is they track people's locations for government security agencies, and you can actually go back in time. You can say, I want to know where this person was 3 years ago. Who did they meet with in this square, and so forth. Obviously, this stuff is illegal in Europe. As part of that investigation, we found out that among Cobweb's companies, government clients was the United States, El Salvador, and Hungary. Hungary is, as you can see here, the first confirmation of the use of this type of technology in Europe. And actually, we collaborated on that research with a Hungarian journalist, some of you may know, Jamal Khashoggi, who, as a twist, about a week before we published our report, Orban charged him with espionage. So that threw a little wrinkle into our research. And by the way, this is the latest thing. This is an Israeli vendor called Rayzone. You know about AdInt now. We'll get ready for CarInt. Okay, your car is a surveillance machine. Isn't that interesting? So getting back to our vicious cycle, what does this do? All of this technology now thriving in this ecosystem, I truly believe it's helping to spread authoritarianism and fascism, the decline of democracy. If you look at any of the indicators over the last 10 years about democratic decline, that maps on almost perfectly to the time frame of the spread of the business model that we're talking about. And of course, we can't talk about this subject without focusing in on the United States. I mean, look at this rapid decline in the United States. I know it's shocking, you maybe get desensitized to it, but I've studied authoritarianism my entire life, and what's going on in that country checks every single box. What's really disturbing, though, around the topic that I'm speaking to you about is the ways in which the American tech companies have just fully got on board this agenda. Some people call this techno-fascism, and I can see why. I mean, can you believe the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, actually bestowed a gift of gold to Trump in the White House? I mean, how more obsequious can you get? These companies have a lot of your data. That's a very scary thing to think about. Just to zero on one for a minute, Palantir, everyone talks about. Well, Palantir has done fabulously under the Trump administration. They're very much a component of the mass deportation effort. If you've ever noticed newsreels of ICE agents screeching to a halt at a Home Depot and grabbing somebody, and you ask yourself, how do they know that person was there? Think about advertising intelligence, because we know they have contracts with companies like Cobwebs. That's exactly how it's going on. And now, of course, they're wearing smart glasses that are outfitted with biometric facial recognition back into these massive databases. And what about spyware? Topic I was describing to you earlier. Well, our friends at NSO Group now have new owners. The new owner is a guy named David Friedman, who happens to be Trump's former bankruptcy lawyer and the former ambassador to Israel. So that's not a good sign for our executive order that we talked about earlier. And they have a contract, we know, with Paragon, the company that's the technology was abused in Italy. And of course, all of this is being used for this broad crackdown on an ambiguous idea of the left, universities, whatever, scary stuff. I stand before you today and I would say confidently the Citizen Lab could not exist in the United States. And I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen, which I think is inevitable, if we discover a migrant support worker group's phone hacked by ICE agents using Paragon technology. Then what? Now, lastly, what is this doing for civil society? When I started out in this area 30 years ago, there was a great deal of enthusiasm about the internet, and even at the beginning of social media. This would liberate people, this would bring about waves of democratization. What I am seeing firsthand in speaking to a lot of civil society members around the world is the exact opposite. There's a huge chilling effect happening. Loujain Al-Hatul, the person I described, extreme example, but she actually gets post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms by the mere presence of a phone. What does that tell you about the nature of this technology now and what it means for democracy moving forward? I will end with a New Yorker cartoon because they always seem to get it right. And the last thing I'll say is, what to do about all of this? I don't pretend to have a simple answer, except for the rule of law, investigative journalism, and rigorous evidence-based independent research is the only thing I can think of to get ourselves out of this. So thank you for your indulgence. I appreciate it.
I have a good news and bad news. The good news is that also basically there is an information how strongly people have been uploading. So this information will go. But the good news is that we have 30 minutes for your questions and basically comments and so on. So we can have an interesting discussion.
Great.
Please. Yeah, please. Yeah, we have a mic.
Could people identify themselves?
Yeah, let's people identify because it's also more interesting where the question comes from.
Eric Prem, I'm here with the Digital Humanist Initiative, among other things, but that's probably...
Thank you.
Congratulations to both the talk, and I've been following what you have been doing for the last, I don't know, more than a decade now.
Thank you.
My question is, and I think it poses also the question a bit about your recommendation in the end, because these recommendations only work in a society where you have already accepted, certain standards of democracy, of being ethical. Do you feel this still upholds, or is there a much deeper threat to what you're doing, that the standards that we have been used to for so long are more fundamentally eroding? So how do you see society going in this respect?
Well, as you can gather, I'm pretty pessimistic about the state of the world, and it's hard to find even in constitutional democracies some glimmer of hope. I mean, as I speak to you, unfortunately, my own government is putting before Parliament a lawful access bill that is among the worst I've ever seen in the world, that would allow law enforcement to essentially put in place backdoors into platforms, weaken encryption and so forth. And that's Canada. So what does that tell you? It's very worrying. I think that I don't pretend to have a secret answer to getting out of this vicious cycle, except for some basic things. Where I've seen success is where the law has been applied, where it can be. So holding people accountable might not work at a national level or a regional level, but maybe you have like a criminal case you can use. I actually think what the Biden administration did was very effective. You could look at it as self-serving or hypocritical or whatever you want to say about the US doing that, because they have their own equipment. They don't need to buy from the companies that they're putting on essentially a sanctions list. But it did send a major shot through the industry, and it's too bad the momentum was lost around that, because an international regime could have been built where other countries were following that. But all I can say is I think, in any country around the world, even ones where it's very desperate, it's authoritarian situation, I work very closely with civil society activists in those countries, and many of them are very brave, and they're pushing for more transparency, more accountability, and they continue in spite of the risks, and that gives me hope to work with them.
Yeah, please.
I'm Leopold from Austrian Institute of Technology. I'm the head of the Center for Digital Safety and Security. I have two questions, really, where I'm very much interested on your answer and also for the public discussion. Basically, it's an observation during my whole working life. So I claim responsible in Austria only. The last 35 years, I was working for bringing the internet and all what you've mentioned, the technical basis, to the society. So I'm part of it. Observation number one, already 20 years ago, I was sitting in similar rooms when the internet was not yet there. And I was claiming, I'm a technician as a background, we should start a dialogue how we are using this technology. Nowadays, I'm doing the same with AI. I do not see too much reflection. I feel still alone. That's wondering me. So you're completely right, I support all what you said, but in a wider audience, why is everybody ignoring it? I would say really ignoring it, and why even I can prove that they're ignoring it. Just two examples, two times, two extreme points I want to tell you. In my time when I was product manager at Telekom Austria, when we were starting to sell out internet access, I tried to sell a protection tool for the internet access. €1 a month. What do you believe how much market success this was? How many people were accepting €1 in addition to their internet access just to get a tool which protects their internet access?
I'm guessing not many.
Immediately, after 3 months, because of no acceptance, nobody was willing. Unbelievable. Still today now, I'm in the research center. We are offering many tools for protection. And when I'm on the stage and they're asking, and I get the question, what should we do to improve cybersecurity? Everything is available. We should change our way of building systems. Many tools are out there. The biggest problem is still nobody in the private sector, free market, in the public consumer market, also in the business market. Nobody is yet accepting, hopefully it will in the future, to pay a little bit more to get more security. And that's for me amazing. That's the one story. Why is this? Why can we not explain what you just did? Hey, come on, with a little bit more spending investment for everybody, we can make altogether our platform safer. Observation number one. Observation number two, which I'm since 30 years overwhelmed. I was growing up and came into the business where I was working for an incumbent operator, the state-owned operators. We spent an enormous amount of pressure and investment all over the world to regulate those incumbent operators. Funny enough, and all the society was supporting it. And funny enough, nobody was trusting, for example, Telekom Austria or PTT at that time, was trusting this operator. Even, I would say, all the mechanisms were in place that any possibilities of this operator to spy you, because we had laws, everything was there. But every customer in the world was immediately fully in favor of spending all the data to one private person, a global monopoly. That's for me, I still don't understand. And still today, everybody is sending his private data to Musk or call it. And if I would say I create a new data state-owned platform with all the security, everybody will claim I'm suspect, I do not believe. So how can we change this? I believe complete silly understanding.
There's a lot of points in there. I won't belabor it, but I'll just make one additional observation, and that is that because of the business model being what it is, there's no downside to pushing something out that's insecure. This idea, move fast and break things, still dominates. So all of our infrastructure rests on an ecosystem that's invasive by design, insecure, and poorly regulated, prone to exploitation. Why is that happening? You probably have a better answer than me. It's the nature of society that we live in that this is going on.
We'll go for the next question there. Can I also ask you something? Because it's about the public side, not the technical side. I was talking to a Chinese colleague some 2 or 3 years ago, and we're talking about the social score system. which is very much the nationalized version of what you're doing. And I said, probably you're very uncomfortable with this and so on. And he said, you know what?
Not really.
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you have forgotten what you're afraid most in an authoritarian state. And this is that you're going to be accused and framed for something that you have not done.
Mm.
So paradoxically, you said, I want them to know everything, because probably I'm better protected. Probably they're imagining even worse things if they're not listening to my phone.
Mm.
And in my view, this is interesting, because if you go beyond the activists, beyond the very politically active people,
Yeah.
I'm interested to what extent, for example, ordinary people said, they have been always listening to us, they're always going to listen to us, I have not much to do, so that's it.
Well, there's a variation of the I've got nothing to hide,
Yeah.
so I'm not doing anything wrong, go ahead and surveil me. The obvious problem with that is the people who are doing the surveilling are not fair people.
Exactly.
I've had so many cases of family members who've had nothing to do, children of journalists having their phones under surveillance. And of course, the people who do this sort of thing are very unethical, bad people. So even if you're not doing anything wrong, they can manufacture it, as you well know, to make it appear that you're doing something you're not. And you know, if we allow that to happen, then democracy is not going to last very long. I don't want to live in an Orwellian system because it gives me this false sense that my security is taken care of. It's likely not taken care of because of the nature of the people behind it all.
And there is, by the way, a huge dilemma for the human rights activist in authoritarian state. If you go with a very well protected, for example, smartphone, the moment you are arrested, basically the people who are arresting you starts to treat you in a particularly strong way, what you're protecting, why your phone is so protected, and so on. So I do believe, particularly in this kind of a classical authoritarian environments, this is a major issue. I have been talking to people working in really tough environment. They said, I don't want to be arrested with the software, which holds a high level of protection, because this looks like a self-accusation.
That's right.
But please, there was a question there, sorry. Please.
Thanks a lot. That was a terrific presentation on a terrifying subject. I just wonder, what is the interplay of this with the issues of platform capitalism? Because of course the most way in which people then will be controlled at the lower end of the spectrum is by platforms today, and we know that platforms that gather a huge amount of information on laborers of different types. This is how we regenerate such societies. And I wonder, if the Citizen Lab has come across this sort of overlaps between the type of surveillance that you talk about around political cases and the everyday surveillance instead that will take place by these other forms of, everyday way on which we organize our lives and work.
I think that's the convergence that I'm describing. It's, there used to be this, do you know The Onion, the satirical, that many years ago, I think it was like 20 years ago, they had this one thing, it was a video at the time of what would appear to be a CIA agent testifying before Congress, saying how Facebook was a CIA invention. And he was saying, isn't it amazing? People post everything about what they're doing, their lifestyles, their habits, and we can't believe that this has taken off. And that's obviously satire, but there's a kernel of truth in it. If you actually look at the Snowden disclosures, going back to then, I spent a lot of time on that myself. What was interesting to me was not so much the capabilities the NSA and the Five Eyes had as revealed by the disclosures. The more interesting part of it, in fact, the vast majority, I would say, was about the agencies going to the tech platforms to get access to the data. Now, you might be asking something slightly different too, which is, do the tech platforms do this type of manipulation? And of course they do of their workers. If you look at Amazon, for example, they're very rich studies, not by my lab, but by other people who have examined how Amazon puts its own workers under surveillance. Many other companies do the same thing. And then the last thing I would say about it is look at the makeup of the owners of most of the big tech platforms right now. these are not the type of human beings that we should be entrusting with anything. Elon Musk is one of the world's most vile people, and he happens to also be the world's richest man, and he owns a large proportion of the public sphere. What is he doing with all of that data? Karp, the CEO of Palantir, has written a book that I wouldn't recommend. It's a bad book, but it's instructive. It's called The Technological Republic. The thesis of the book is Silicon Valley has wasted its time on doing shallow things. It should instead direct all of its efforts towards US military might. That is a scary prospect. So there's a lot of convergence and overlap between state surveillance and corporate surveillance and the tech platforms, especially with AI. If you think about the way most people use AI right now, I mean, it's a marvelous thing to behold. It's very hypnotizing, extremely powerful technology. Of course, it could have many good uses as well. But most people today are using it as a form, at least as I can tell, as a, everything from therapeutic counseling, how do I take care of my kids, what about my taxes, all of this personal stuff, very, very intimate personal stuff is being shared with a machine. And I don't know if people realize this is all going to, not into the air, it's going to a specific company, into specific machines that are controlled by a company, and we don't know what they're doing with that data, who they're sharing it with. And they're US-based companies. It doesn't give me much relief either to think about like a Canadian version of this or a European version of this. There's a lot of momentum around this idea of tech sovereignty. Well, if you're just going to replace one of these machines with a different branded one, and you still have the same underlying infrastructure of constant surveillance of users without any transparency or accountability, we're no better off.
Next question, and just to go on the positive side, for East European of my generation, we have been preoccupied with the idea of informers, people who are informing on you. At least in this version, nobody's informing on you. You're informing on yourself. Please.
I just wanted to ask about, maybe this would already be in your methods section, but you were saying earlier about what your digital investigators, like what they're specifically looking at.
I'm trying to see you through the tripod. I can see you. It's
Hello.
okay, no, I can see you now.
So I just wanted to ask, with the IP addresses and the kind of investigation to the servers and all the rest, I just wonder if Russia is creating like a new internet, which has been evidenced by, say, like Bellingcat, post-Ukraine war. Does that mean that such investigations would be more difficult to trace back?
That's a very interesting question you asked that, because we have been investigating the Russian internet infrastructure, and this is not actually anything new. It's something that's pretty consistent. Maybe this might be interesting to you too, is that the Russian, as formidable as the Russian state may be, when you actually look at their domestic telecommunications, internet surveillance system, it's incredibly poorly constructed and insecure, to the point where they're leaking all sorts of, really it's about, the FSB, the rule of the system is that the internet service providers must provide a direct channel to the FSB. But the FSB makes money off of it. So they have, monopoly companies that provide the technology. So it's all a kind of little political economy of corruption. And not surprisingly, the surveillance is very bad. That doesn't mean it's not dangerous. It's still dangerous. I wouldn't want to live in that circumstance, but it is kind of surprising to see.
The black market of data on the Russian side, for example, in Bellingcat, why they're so effective is that
flight manifests,
flight numbers, telephone conversation, this and that. So this is the problem with the data, because you're just fearing the Musks of this world. But they could be somebody who is on a much smaller scale, who goes after you personally for very kind of an important things, because the black market of data is incredible. And in the case of Russia, it's really kind of extremely, extremely big. So this is totally true. There was a question here and there too,
the Institute for Defending European Democracies. We are fighting disinformation from foreign forces. And we were founding this something like 1.5 years ago. And of course we said maybe, or some friends told us, listen, this might be dangerous. So I came up to ask my very high-ranking Secret Service person in Austria. I said, how can I protect myself? And I said, well, the best would be good. Yeah, there is kind of a, they are not somehow able to give you any device how you can protect, because they can't even protect themselves. And why do I point this out? Because we don't have the consciousness what is happening. And that's a problem we had last week. We've been in Prague at the Globser conference, that the consciousness of people, what is happening, is not there. And so they don't know why we have to spend money, why we have to invest, why we have to be engaged against all these things. And it's the same with me. Why do we have to fight against information? It's not that bad, no, because they don't know where the influence is. And the same things here. If you said, I'm going to look differently on my mobile phone, I got it newly yesterday, so I think it might be clean, yeah? But as you said so, I have no idea. As you said, you are not a Russian spy. Okay, how shall I know, yeah? In the end, there is an enormous insecurity for those who are involved in that, but all the others don't look at it. Why don't we expose these things much bigger?
I'm trying.
Remember, yeah. No, you're not the things, the topics. Yeah. I remember there was a campaign once, it could hit you. It was about viruses or whatever. It could hit you. And these are all things that could hit every one of us, because a criminal could do it without any political agenda, whatever, and they do it in the end. Yeah. So what can we do to raise the awareness in that? I'm aware of my mobile phone now, but I don't know what I can do, except calling you tomorrow. What can everyone else do, and what could we do for society to create the awareness for the whole thing? We have to talk about it much more detail, more stories.
Yeah.
Thanks, it was long.
Ron, and Mairis, let's take all the questions, because we have 10, 12 minutes more. So please, let's everybody who wants to ask. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a quite simple question. Can you talk a little bit about...
just present yourself, because it might be it's interesting where the question comes from.
Not that interesting. I'm not affiliated with anything. I'm András Simongati. I'm just here because I'm curious about this topic. So my question is, can you talk a bit about the financial aspect to it? So let's say there is a Panyi Szabolcs, who is an investigative journalist in Hungary, and Orbán commissions spyware to spy on this person for, let's say, 3 months. Yeah, is it a package of duration, or a package on a person, or how does it work?
There was a question, yeah, there.
Okay.
Ross King, AIT. I lead the data science and artificial intelligence group there. My question is, so you showed us a number of spyware types. You showed us maybe a dozen or 15 companies. What fraction of the ecosystem do you think you know about compared to how much is not known? Thank you.
That's a good question. Tip of the iceberg. We're good?
Yeah, the last one. Yeah, please.
Sorry. Do you fear for your own safety, given that you're exposing rogue governments?
Well, I can answer the last first. Of course, if you went into this line of work in a cavalier way, you'd be very foolish. And so one of the things I'm very proud of is how seriously I and my team take the issues of risks. So we routinely think through as best we can. I mean, we don't, it's very unorthodox for a university group to be doing this, so it's a bit complicated. But we spend a lot of time thinking through and trying our best to protect ourselves against it. And of course I worry about that. But at the same time, there is a bit of adrenaline that comes. I think I've kind of, here I am in Vienna. I psychoanalyzed myself while I'm here. So I think there's a couple of, I got on a couch, and I think there's definitely an adrenaline rush that comes, almost is very addictive. I know that everyone on my team, and these are, not students, these are mid-career, very capable professionals, all share this adrenaline rush that comes from the hunt. And I think that explains a lot, and you have to be careful because that could also be quite dangerous. But also we share a commitment to fighting bullies. I think when you know that you're on the right side and you're doing something good, as hard as it is to define that sometimes, you look at, I spent hours talking to Loujain Al-Hatul, hearing what she went through. If that doesn't motivate you to be brave and do what you do, I don't know what else would, because as far as I'm concerned, she is a hero to be doing what she's doing over that, and what she experienced in the face of something that should just be decent human right, it enrages you. It makes you want to do what you do, but you have to protect yourself, and also you have to protect the people you're working with. People like her. There's a great responsibility that I don't put human subjects at risk, and thankfully we have a very good research ethics protocol review body at the University of Toronto that very closely scrutinizes what we do at the Citizen Lab, and that's very good too. It's what we see as the tip of the iceberg. It's a massive market. It's expanding dramatically. I think spyware might be yesterday's news a bit, because what's happened is, because of the awareness and because of the work of my lab and other groups that have emerged doing this type of forensic work, the defensives have gotten a bit better. Apple, Google, Microsoft, they're all doing a lot more than they were 10 years ago. So what I worry about is ADINT and some of the other corollary forms of gathering information that are just as powerful. That whole area, we're only beginning to peel back the curtain there. In terms of the cost structure, it's hard to say because these are secretive contracts. There's a lot of front companies involved and it depends on the jurisdiction. NSO Group, infamously, a whistleblower for NSO Group talked to journalist Ronan Farrow, who asked him that very question. And he said they would price their products differently for different governments. So you'd make it cheaper for European governments, and you'd charge like the Saudis and the Emiratis a lot more. And why? Because you want European customers. It gives you legitimacy, it gives you reputation. And with the Gulf countries, they're going to pay 8 times as much because they're very wealthy. So yeah, that's what I know about it.
Listen, thank you very much, and they should be a positive note. And it was not easy in this situation, but we saw that there was a special encyclical of the Pope and the AI. So probably the hope should come from the Vatican. So thank you very much.
Maybe I should check his phone.
Ron just was saying that probably they should check the phone of the Pope. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you. Pleasure.